Alright, hello everyone. I'm Mr. Uppercase T, and welcome to the Rosy Spacepad. This is an oxygen not included map I've been working on for a little while, about, I guess, 127 hours, nearly 1,200 cycles, and I figured I would show it off. So this is an Arborea map. I'm going to put the seed in the description of this video if you want to play it yourself, and I'm also going to include this save file in case you want to check out anything on this map afterwards. Alright, so let's get to it. So we'll start off with my main base. In particular, we'll start off with the oldest thing on this base, which is this self-powered, self-cooling oxygen machine, the Spacepad, if you will. I don't know why that name hasn't caught on yet, but this thing is incredibly old. If I look at the properties here, this thing is 1,100 cycles old, so I built this on cycle 80 or so, and it has been running non-stop ever since, and has just been working like an absolute champ. So this section here is basically your fairly standard full Rodriguez. It provides enough oxygen for about 30 duplicants. And then I've stapled on this thing, which is a cooling unit. And it is still self-powered, so if you look at the power overlay, there are no wires sticking out of here at all. And this thing is consuming 95 degree oxygen, or 95 degree water, sorry, and it spits out 21 degree oxygen, or 22 degree oxygen. And yeah, this thing is completely self-powered. It works like an absolute champ. It's super, super sweet. Basically, we have this radiant pipe loop. This is all lead piping. I had a lot of lead, so I just built this out of lead. And it goes through the cold box. Everything in the cold box is made out of aluminum, though, but everything else is made out of whatever crap you have lying around. And the reason I had to do this is because we're on Arborea, and I don't have any gold. So I had to actually find a way to cool all this stuff. I couldn't just, like, normally I would just run the input water through here and run everything at 95 degrees, but I had to actually cool all this because I didn't have any gold and I didn't have any steel, so I did it this way. But yeah, this works really, really great. I'm probably going to reuse this design again. And not only is it cooling the oxygen, but there's also this line here, and this is actually an extra line of cooling, so I'm actually mooching even more cooling out of this thing, and it's still self-powered. So this line is just going through all the floors in my base. My base is... there's granite piping with this 21 degree water going through, and that keeps the temperature of my whole main base area incredibly stable. So this is my main base. It's the only place where duplicants are not allowed to wear exosuits, and it is very well temperature controlled. I've never had any issues with plants stifling or anything like that. Even when you bring in like space artifacts or diamond window tiles from the oil biome that are really hot, never any problem with overheating. It works really, really great. So yeah, that's the spawn, and then here we have some ranches. I have some Dracos and some pips. The pips are eating trees in natural tiles. These are natural tiles made of phosphorus. So there are a couple of different ways you can get natural tiles. You can build mechanical doors and surround them with tiles and delete them. You can boil dirt. And I went with the phosphorus strategy here, which actually worked really, really well. Basically, if you just take phosphorite and raise it to about 250 degrees, it turns into liquid. And then you can just take a pitcher pump and a bottle emptier and dump it into specific spots where you want a tile, and then once it gets down to 44 degrees, where's the melting point of this? Oh, I've got the wire. Once it goes down to 44 degrees, it turns into a tile. So as long as you can keep this below 44 degrees, you have a natural tile, and they're really easy to build. So I did that for planting these trees for these pips. The dirt that these pips produce goes to these mealwood farms for these Dracos. The Dracos, I have some hydrogen just on the ceiling. I've seen a lot of complicated setups where people set up like elaborate mazes to keep the Dracos trapped in hydrogen as much as possible. I don't bother with that. This is fine. They spend enough of their time in hydrogen. I'm not super I'm not super concerned about it. This is just such a simple design, just a normal room. Anyways, over here we have our bedrooms. I've been working really hard to get lots and lots of space artifacts to just absolutely hammer the decor. So we grab someone who's in the washroom right now. She has 5,200 current environmental decor. So I have all these ridiculous artifacts. They have 10 tiles of radius for their decor, so they affect 2 floors up and 2 floors down. And I have them built every 2 floors. So all the bedrooms and the washrooms are just covered in decor. It keeps all my duplicants very, very happy. Washrooms and showers, these are all just hooked up with a single water sieve. So this water sieve is just recycling the polluted water, putting it back into the system. Any excess polluted water just goes into these thimble reeds, so it never backs up. I also have a wild poke shell. This is Punchy the 8th, I think, or so, something like that. He eats the polluted dirt that comes out of here and spits out sand, and he occasionally attacks the duplicates that attempt to harvest these thimblereeds, but they deserve it, so, you know. I have some massage rooms, some triage cots over here just in case, and I have my lovely monuments, as well as some spore kids. So I had 17 spore kids on this map. 17. Getting through the oil biome was an absolute disaster, but yeah, I put them to good use. I just made a big chlorine room and was super careful about it, and planted these spore kids. So, you know, there's a lot of germs. Where's the germ overlay? Yeah, just a lot of zombie spores, but it's fine. And then yeah, I had a lot of extra steel, so I made some monuments over here. Down here we have our kitchens, so all my duplicates are currently eating burgers. I have this like 3-stage kitchen system. This is for raw ingredients like sleet wheat and meat. That gets delivered to this grill, and then they get dumped in here. So this is for lettuce, frost buns, and barbecue, which then gets delivered to this gas range, and then it gets converted into frost burgers. And then this arm can deliver it to the fridge, where duplicates can actually reach. Duplicates can't actually reach any of these areas. Also, these areas are filled with CO2, so this food never goes bad. As you can see, it's a sterile atmosphere. I'm pointing at the monitor like you can see what I'm pointing at. So we have infinite food storage, hence the 8 million calories. The reason I have so many calories is actually, I actually have 30 dupes on this map, but 10 of them currently live in rockets. So I've created enough food for 30 dupes, but 10 of them don't eat ever, so we don't have that problem. We have our lovely great halls here. Again, lots of space artifacts around. And then we have our lovely rec rooms. Where's the room overlay? So we have 2 rec rooms. This one is the bar. So duplicates have their choice of beverage. They can drink normal water, espresso, juice, or soda. And then we have the water park, where we have saunas, as well as mechanical surfboards. Some of the new decor buildings. These mechanical surfboards are really nice. I probably will use these again. They don't take that much power, only 480 watts. And they're really easy to set up. You just put them on mesh tiles and put a pump underneath. Not bad. If you're interested in the sauna setup, I came up with the most compact, most ridiculously inefficient setup ever. There's an aqua tuner in here that raises the temperature to 105 degrees, so this room is filled with steam. That steam gets pumped into insulated gas pipes made of insulation into the saunas. And the chill, so the thermal aqua tuner cools liquid, and it just cools liquid and then pumps it into this room, where there's just a tepidizer to prevent it from freezing. So I'm being super, super inefficient here, but it's also really compact and takes care of itself and is completely self-contained, so I kind of like it. I mean, it's an extremely late game build for sure, so. But yeah, I certainly have the spare power for it, so it's not a big deal. The bottom of my base, I have a bunch of oxyferns. Again, these are planted in wild tiles on phosphorus tiles that, again, I just bottle emptied some phosphorus over here. And this takes care of all the CO2. The only other pumping I'm doing is this gas pump, which is piping CO2 into a canister filler, and this is used for the soda fountains. Soda fountains need bottled CO2 to work. So that's supplying that. And that works really, really well. Someone's enjoying an espresso. All the raw ingredients for the juicer and the espresso are stored in this pile. So this is mushrooms and bristleberries, pinch of pepper nuts, and meal ice. So that everyone can enjoy whatever drink they want and do other fun activities like chilling on their surfboard. Alright, so that's the main base. The only way out of the base is with an exosuit, so everyone will always be protected. The exosuits, I'm piping oxygen into them like this. This setup has actually worked really well for me. Having 2 pipes come from 2 different directions and have them just feed every suit. A lot of setups, I have problems where like one random dock in the middle will never get oxygen, but I've never had any problems with this. This has worked really, really nicely. So leaving the base, we can go check out my infinite storage area here. So this is where I store everything on the map. These containers are set to store most things and set to sweep only, so if I sweep up anything, it'll end up in here. Yeah, this arm then delivers to a bunch of shipping containers where everything gets shipped out to various locations. So we have a shipping line for rust and for salt, and this goes to my liquid oxygen production. And then we have a line for dirt, phosphorite, and slime for mushrooms, sleet wheat, and what is this? Pinch of pepper nuts, respectively. So these go down to my farms. And then there's a line here that takes eggs and other random edibles and delivers them to my kitchen in my main base. So this is just the main shipping area. Works really well. It's filled with chlorine, so there's no germs in it at all, which is nice because I am shipping slime out of here. And basically, it's really well pressured with chlorine, so I can put off-gassing things in here like slime, and they don't off-gas because the pressure's too high. Okay, where to next? I guess let's go check out my lovely, lovely tree farm. So this is a ridiculously excessive tree farm. This is a tree farm that I made. It's pretty old, actually. How old are some of these tiles? Yeah, about 500, 600 cycles old. So these are natural dirt tiles, and these I made the old-fashioned way by boiling algae. It was actually not that bad. Basically, I just ran all these pipes, vacuumed out this whole area, filled everything with, all these tiles were insulation, and then I ran hot petroleum through here and heated up the algae. I vacuumed it out, and then I put, I broke all these pipes that were filled with petroleum to drop like 10 kilograms of petroleum on every tile that had algae in it. So the only place that heat could go, because everything was insulation or vacuum, or it was petroleum and algae. So the heat was very directly put into the dirt tiles, and it worked really well. Also, we have pipes going through the natural tiles, because I built these pipes first and then the tiles afterwards. So that works really nicely. Now you might be asking, aren't these trees too close together? Aren't you getting not maximum branch efficiency here? But that is not true, actually. What you do is you build ladders in these two tiles, and in these two tiles, don't actually dig these. But these two tiles and these two tiles, you put ladders here before they grow branches. And what that does is it ensures that these two outer trees grow all their branches in the outer slots. So there's 4 branches out here and 4 branches out here. And then each of these trees on the outside get 1 inner slot as well. So these 2 branches here and the top. So they have 5 branches. And that leaves exactly 5 branches for the middle tree as well. It gets 4 slots on the sides and 1 on top. So if I look at the plant overlay, after like 5 seconds of the game lagging out, we can see that there are actually 5 branches per tree. So if we look at like these 3 trees, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So there are 15 branches between these 5 trees. So we are getting maximum branch efficiency here. So why do I have this many trees? The answer is this many wild trees. If a duplicant comes and harvests the branches within 2 cycles of them becoming ready to harvest, then this setup produces 20 kilograms per second of lumber, and which is conveniently enough exactly 1 shipping rail. So this shipping rail is just filled with lumber 100% of the time, all the time. I'm generating 20 kilograms per second of lumber, and that's what this is for. So obviously I have a nice ethanol production factory. But the other thing about this is that this room is actually very cool. This room is 16 degrees. Arbor trees need 15 degrees or higher to grow. So I've set this to 16 degrees with this aquatuner cooling loop here. The temperature center set to 16 degrees. And it's going through all these pipes with polluted water. And this place is ridiculously well insulated. We have double insulation on the top, double insulation on the bottom. We have these vacuum doors at the entrance. I guess I haven't explained this, but this is viscogel, which is a liquid that stacks vertically. And the point is there's a vacuum in here. If I look at the gas overlay, there's no gas in here. So normally when you insulate a room, the weakest point is the door. The door leaks a lot of heat, but since this door is actually a vacuum, this room can transfer heat into the door, but the door can't transfer heat into anything because there's a vacuum on the other side. So this is perfect insulation on the doors. So basically this steam turbine never needs to run because like we've got it to 16 degrees, very little heat is generated in here. So all these branches are 16 degrees. And so not only am I generating 20 kilograms per second of lumber, but I'm generating 20 kilograms per second of 16 degree mass, which is a lot of cooling. And that's actually what I'm using it for. I'm actually lumber cooling my entire industrial brick. That's what I would like to have happen, but unfortunately there's actually a bug with this. So if we look at some of this lumber here, this lumber is indeed 16 degrees, but as soon as it goes onto the shipping rail, we notice that the shipping rail contents, you can see there, is genetic ooze at 20 degrees. So when you put lumber onto a shipping rail, no matter what its temperature is, it will turn into 20 degree genetic ooze, which is rather unfortunate. I would much prefer getting 16 degree lumber, but instead we have 20 degree lumber, which is too bad. If you want, you can abuse this bug really badly. If you want, you could just put lumber onto a shipping rail, use it to cool something, drop it on the floor, pick it up, put it back on the rail. Every time you put it back on the rail, it resets to 20 degrees. But yeah, I'm not abusing that bug. In fact, it's working against me. I would much rather have 16 degree lumber, but that's what we got. So if we follow the shipping rail, it goes all the way up here and gets dumped into this giant water tank. So this is the ice box for my industrial brick here. So it dumps all of its temperature. So we have 20 degree Janekus coming in. Out the other side, it is about 28 degrees. So it gains 8 degrees cooling off this liquid. And then I directly cool the petroleum generators and the natural gas generators. So again, it's coming in at 28, and by the time it's done this, it's about 31. You really want the water tank because lumber on shipping rails does not give off its heat very well in air. As you can see, it only gained 3 degrees there, but in the water it gained 8 degrees. And then it gets delivered to these ethanol distillers. So we have 20 ethanol distillers here, which exactly consumes 20 kilograms per second. And that generates exactly enough ethanol to run 5 petroleum generators. The petroleum, or the ethanol comes out here, goes to these petroleum generators. And then there's liquid pipes going in here to suck up all the coldness from this water tank, and it cools the entire industrial brick. It goes up here, it cools all these ethanol distillers, these steam turbines, these coal generators, glass forges, everything. It's all lumber cooled. There's not a single aqua tuner in here anywhere. So these ethanol distillers, they produce tons and tons of polluted dirt. That polluted dirt just gets shipped into these hatch farms, sage hatch farms. Sage hatches can eat polluted dirt, which is really, really great. And it produces tons and tons of coal. So they eat 140 kilograms per cycle of polluted dirt and produce 140 kilograms per second of coal. So this number of sage hatches could actually run 6 coal generators 100% of the time if I wanted to. I don't. I just have these 9 coal generators that are hooked up to automation, so they shut off. They only turn on when the battery is low, which doesn't happen all that frequently. Yeah, so in the end, the lumber is producing me all the power from these 5 petroleum generators and pretty much all these coal generators too. If we look at coal, I have 2,000 tons of coal, so that tells you how little these run really. But yeah, so that's, and this is all completely for free because all these trees are in natural tiles and don't cost any resources to run. So it's a really, really efficient setup. Or, yeah, efficient, I don't know, overkill. But yeah, it was very fun to set up. So this industrial brick is also vacuum sealed. And the CO2 in here, so these things also generate tons and tons of CO2. And if you see the mesh tiles sort of go up back and forth, so this is sort of like a counterflow sort of setup, but the CO2 slowly drifts up and also helps cooling. Because the CO2 is very dense and it's pretty cool, it's only 40 degrees. So it cools things like the molecular forge, which doesn't have any other actual direct cooling on it, before eventually just getting vented out into space. I certainly don't need this much CO2 for anything. Yeah. What next? I guess we can have a look at our farm. So this is a farm where we grow most of our vegetables. I have this nice little double cooling unit. So there's 2 temperatures for this. There's this one which is set to -20 for the sleet wheat. And then there's this one which is set to 17 degrees for the rest of the farm. So this one is hooked up to the aqua tuner, and this one is hooked up to these doors that sucks heat out of the colder chamber. So if you look at the temperature, this area is very, very cold. This area is a little bit warmer. It's about 20 degrees. It's good temperature for all the vegetables I'm growing. So I have sleet wheat up here, some bristle blossoms, mealwood, thimbleweeds, lettuce, waterweed, mushrooms, mealwoods, more lettuce, more mealwood. And these are for the burgers as well as the espresso machine, the juicer. And then I have some pinch of pepper nuts for the espresso machine. The polluted water for these thimbleweeds is actually coming from these petroleum generators. These generate tons and tons of polluted water, and that just gets pumped out of here and delivered to the pinch of pepper nuts as well as these thimbleweeds. So this generates quite a bit of polluted water. So these thimbleweeds, I'm getting quite a bit of insulation out of this when they run. Okay. So that's the tree farm, that's the veggies. Down here we have our polluted water tank. So this is mostly the bottom of the map. Has been flattened out and is one massive, did I say polluted water? I meant crude oil tank. I tried to keep this clean for a little while, but since it covers so much of the map, any water that leaks from anywhere just ends up in here, but it's not a big deal. The pump is way at the bottom. The only other thing down here is this storage container where I store 2 spore kid seeds, the leftover 2, in a prison where no pips could possibly get at them. Anyways, this crude oil gets pumped up and pumped to my petroleum boiler, which we'll get to in a minute. to actually get crude oil, we have these suckers, these oil wells. This is just the Francis John design for taming oil wells. It's a design I really, really like. Basically, the oil comes out of here, it seals itself in its own liquid lock before dripping out here, and just drips into the main petroleum tank. And then there's a gas pump to pump out the natural gas. These don't run very much though because there's an automation sensor. If the tank is this full, to prevent it from overflowing, they shut off. I don't really need that much crude oil. So yeah, those are those. And then I also have a leaky oil fisher, and this is my leaky oil fisher tamer. So this is a design of my own. Basically, the oil comes out of here, it drips past, it touches these diamond tiles and shifts its heat into a steam chamber. And this steam turbine is self-cooling. So this was actually inspired by the Francis John metal volcano tamer, actually. I tried to apply it to this leaky oil fisher, and it's basically the same design. It works really well. This doesn't generate that much heat, but it cools down the oil. The oil comes out at like 300 something degrees, right? Yeah, 326, and it gets cooled down to 125, which is nice. And I generate a little bit extra power, not a lot, but a little bit there. The other point is this this tiny little gap here. This is actually important. The idea is if you got rid of this, if you just got rid of this part and had it drip directly out of here, then it would be touching like the air, the cool air, and it would be cooling down the diamond. It would be cooling down the oil and cooling down the diamond tiles, and you'd be getting less heat energy out of it. So instead we have this little gap here, and this is just a vacuum. So the crude oil drips past, dumps all its heat into the diamond, and then goes past this vacuum lock, and then now it's touching air and can be cooled down, and that's fine. Also, since I had this natural gas geyser right here, I figured, why not? I'll just pipe the natural gas through the steam chamber as well. It's 150 degrees. You get something out of it. Normally I would just like pump it straight out of the, just deal with 150 degree natural gas, but since it's right here, I figured I might as well just do it that way. So yeah, so that's all my oil. So I have the leaky oil fisher and these 3 oil wells. And the petroleum itself is produced by this petroleum boiler. So I have 3 volcanoes on this map, and they're all pretty close together. So we have 1 real volcano and 2 minor volcanoes. They dump all their magma into here. This is a vacuum, so that's the magma doesn't actually heat up the air or do anything like that. And it comes down here into this petroleum boiler. So this is, again, a Francis John design. The only change I made was making it 2 tiles high, so it was serviceable. This is my first petroleum boiler I've made, so I wanted to make sure it was serviceable. But basically, the crude oil comes in here, and it's 40 degrees, and we need to raise it to 400 degrees to have it turn into petroleum. So it snakes up here, and then dumps into this tile, turns into petroleum, and then the petroleum drips all the way back down. And the point is, this is 400 degree petroleum, and it's the crude oil goes past it, and it heats up as it goes. So it starts off at 40 degrees, and as it goes, it gets hotter and hotter and hotter. And by the time it's up here, it's already 400 degrees. So we only need a very tiny amount of heat energy from this volcano to turn it into petroleum. And then meanwhile, the petroleum comes out at 400 degrees, and it drips all the way down, and by the time it's done, it's down to only 100 degrees. So we cool off the petroleum and heat up the crude oil at the same time. It's a really nice setup. And it's powered by this volcano. This is where's the automation? It's relatively straightforward automation, but basically there's just 1 thermo sensor here, and once it gets cold enough, it turns on this RoboMiner, drills this out, and then drops another pile of magma onto here. I can show it over here. I'll actually activate it. This side, so these are 2 completely separate systems. This side is my own design. This is just a steam generator. This dropper design is exactly the same. It's just the same exact dropper, except it's dumping its heat into these thermium metal tiles, into these doors, and into these steam chambers. So again, these are actually self-cooling steam turbines, which makes them really, really efficient. You could pull power more quickly out of this by running these hotter, but this is super, super efficient. These are running at 99 degrees, so the water is 99 degrees instead of 95, and we don't have to run an aqua tuner. And all of these steam turbines generate about like 1.2 kilowatts-ish altogether, and it just runs constantly and never stops. I'm pretty sure this magma tank is actually going up right now still. This doesn't actually use all that much magma, but if we want to see it actually trigger, so once this gets down to 300 degrees, it would trigger, so I'm just going to set this to 535, say, or 500, yeah, sure, 530. So once this gets down to 530 degrees, it'll trigger and cycle the magma, so we'll get to see this here. Or will we? I guess I could speed it up. Okay, so 530 degrees, this door opens, this RoboMiner turns on and drills this out. And then there's a delay gate here, a filter gate. So 20 seconds later, these doors will swap, everything resets, new magma gets down in here, this thing resets to be ready to drop again. And we have super hot magma again, and it just starts slowly cooling down. What did I have this set at, 300? Something like that. So yeah, so this eats a little bit of magma, and then these doors open and close to keep the temperature in here between 135 and 128. So I'm using a memory toggle for this. You could do this with one temperature sensor and just say, like, if it's around 135, like, close this door or open it. I just did this so that these doors spaz out a little bit less, so it goes up and down between 135 and 128. So once it goes below 128, the door closes until the temperature gets above 135, and then it opens. So these doors don't spaz out very much at all. They're actually pretty stable, which I like a little bit better, but it's the same thing really. So yeah, so that's what I'm using all my volcanoes for. Okay, what's next? I guess we can have a look at my hydrogen vent tamer. So this was also inspired by the Francis John metal volcano timer. Same sort of idea. Basically, we have a hydrogen vent. So we just have a gas pump. It has to be made out of good metal though, unfortunately. So this is made out of thermium because it needs to be able to withstand 500 degree temperature, but we basically just, hello? There we go. Gas overlay. We just pump it through a steam room and then pump it out. And again, self-cooling steam turbine. So it's rather efficient. And yeah, so instead of getting 500 degree hydrogen, we get 125 degree hydrogen. I guess this is about to erupt. We can have a look. And then, yeah, this is just self-cooling. It works really, really well. Let's see. So hydrogen, it's 490 degrees, and then by the time it's through the steam chamber, it's 110. So we get much cooler hydrogen, and we get a little bit extra power out of it, and this works really well. And it's a really simple design. Unfortunately, you need space metal to do it. Doing this without space metal, this would overheat. Also, if I were to do this again, I would probably make this insulated tile double thick here, so like this wall right here. Because this starts to get really, really quite warm, like these tiles here. And I'm scared that the steam turbine might overheat. So I actually have 3 hydrogen vents on this map. This is one. I have the same exact design up here on this one, which also works fine. And then I have a third one here, but this one I had trouble with. This one overheated several times. I'm not really sure why. I've had no problems with this design in the past, but this one overheated a bunch. So I changed this one up so that it actually uses, I have a little radiator here. This is just hydrogen going in a loop, and it's cooled by this carbon dioxide in my main industrial brick. So it just keeps this thing running really cool. So this one works. But I had some issues with this one overheating. That's most of the designs, I think. Oh, here's a cool steam vent tamer. So this is supplying my liquid oxygen. This is my main liquid oxygen supply. But this is, again, based on a Francis John design. It's slightly different. I use a liquid reservoir instead of a cold box, but more or less the same thing. So I'm just keeping this room at about 95 degrees so that the steam instantly turns into water, and then we can just pump out the water right away. And this just goes right into my liquid oxygen. And when this is dormant, I pull water from my hot steam vent, which is also a neat little design here. So this is my hot steam vent tamer. This is a design I found on the clay forums. I changed it slightly. It didn't work quite right for me, but the basic idea is, it's actually pretty simple. Ignore these side chambers for a second and just look at this box. So there is a hot steam vent and a steam turbine, and this steam turbine eats the steam and just spits out 95 degree water, which is fine. But the steam is 500 degrees, which is too hot for a steam turbine to process efficiently. So we have this one temperature sensor set to about 200 degrees, which is the ideal temperature. And it's hooked up to some automation wires on these doors. So if it gets too hot in here, it closes these doors and heat can get sucked out into these side chambers. So that this room always stays around 200 degrees. So these side chambers are just normal self-recycling steam turbines. I should close this, I guess. This is near the edge of the map. And there's just also an aqua tuner that keeps everything cool. And this works really, really well. So we'll see, this is about to erupt. I'll look at the temperature sensor. So this starts erupting, and then, yeah, as the temperature goes up and down, these doors open and close, and this steam turbine is just running at absolute maximum efficiency, producing 800 watts, spitting out the water, and the rest of these are just keeping this cool. These chambers are about 140 degrees or so. So this whole thing generates a ton of power and a lot of water too. The only other thing I did is I have an atmo sensor in here, and that ensures this is actually hooked up to the steam turbine. It only turns on if the pressure in here is high enough. Because I was having some issues with, not this exact design, but I had to finagle with this a little bit. But I had some issues where it would vacuum out this room, and then the temperature wouldn't transfer very well, and this room got extremely hot. So I just have this atmo sensor in here to prevent it from overheating. But this is a really, really nice design. I did use space metal here, so I am using thermium for the doors and these metal tiles, and I'm using supercoolants in this coolant loop. But you could actually build this without space metals. If you replace these with diamond tiles and steel, and replace this with polluted water, you could actually use this design in the mid-game. Though it depends, you have to work on this design a little bit depending on your steam vent. So this steam vent actually produces 2.4 kilograms per second, or yeah, 2.4 kilograms, and steam turbines only eat 2. So the steam turbine can't actually eat steam from the steam vent fast enough, but if you do the math on the eruption period, like multiplied by the amount of steam, it won't overpressurize because this room is big enough that like 453 grams per second over 166 seconds doesn't overpressurize. But you might need a second steam turbine in the center chamber, for instance, if you want to use this design. But yeah, this design is really nice. I like it a lot. It generates quite a bit of power, and it's like fairly stable. Like these side chambers are basically just running throughout the entire the active period for the most part. It's just this one that's a little bit more finicky. All right, anything else to show off? I guess there's the main power spine here. So I just have a transit tube going up the entire length of the map, going all the way down to the oil biome, and all the way up to space, which I guess is the last thing we have to show off. So for space, my rocket design is very, very simple. I just have jet suit docks, and then I just cram in rockets as close as possible to each other. I have a love-hate relationship with jet suits. They cause the game to lag quite a bit, but holy hell do they ever make your rocket layout simple. Just open it up to the sky. Rockets destroy regolith when they land and take off, and there's nothing in here that can take meteor damage, so this is totally fine. Let's launch this rocket, shall we? This rocket just goes back and forth between the two closest planets, so I just launched this one manually. But all the rest of them are pretty much automated. They're actually all automated for the most part. They're all just hooked up with an automation wire and an AND gate. So these will, if this switch is set to green, as soon as the ship lands, it'll just refuel and take off instantly again. But I can set this to red to force them to land and stay on the ground so that I can alter them or do whatever. If we look at piping, we have petroleum. So I have 2 hydrogen rockets and then a bunch of petroleum rockets. Everything's using liquid oxygen. The liquid hydrogen pipes are made of insulation because that's necessary. These liquid oxygen pipes are actually made out of igneous rock. And it just cycles. So this goes in a big loop so that they don't freeze in the pipes. It just goes back to the liquid oxygen tank. And if we look at the star map, so I actually have 2 rockets that go to these close by planets. And then I have 8 rockets making round trips to these oxidized planets, which don't have anything particularly good in them, but they do have rare artifacts. 50% chance of getting a tier 4 or tier 5 artifact. So these rockets here, they don't even have cargo bays or research modules or anything. It's just engines, command capsules, and they just make round trips getting space artifacts, which is how I have so many ridiculous quantities of space artifacts in my base. It's because those ones have just been running for a couple hundred cycles, really. But that's my rocketry setup here. I really, really like the jet suits. It works really well. And then over here we have, this used to be where I had my space scanners and everything, but I don't need them anymore because I don't need space scanners for my rockets. I don't need my telescope. So this is all just my liquid oxygen and hydrogen. Liquid oxygen and hydrogen, just tanks here, 2 aqua tuners set to various temperatures, supercoolant, fairly normal stuff. My liquid hydrogen is coming from my 3 hydrogen vents and my SPSCOM setup, and they just get piped in. The oxygen, I have this setup here. This is a design I made for rust deoxidizers. I could have used an electrolyzer, but I have so much rust on my map. This has been running for a bunch of cycles, and I still have 500 tons of rust. And it converts it into iron, so it's actually pretty useful. But basically, the oxygen goes to the top, gets vented into the oxygen tank, and the chlorine builds up on the bottom, and there's this sensor that if it detects chlorine for 30 seconds in a row, then it will open these doors for 10 seconds and just dump out all the chlorine. So we just don't have to deal with it at all, it just gets dumped into the vacuum. And if chlorine ever actually gets pumped into these gas pumps, it's actually totally fine. It just freezes in here into a solid and collects on the ground. I actually have a little bit of chlorine in here. That's just totally fine. So this setup works really well. The rust and salt gets shipped in from my main storage tank. My main, infinite storage tank in the center of the map. So that's my liquid oxygen and hydrogen. And and then this is a cooling unit to keep the whole thing cool. It's just, there's a puddle of petroleum here to keep this cool, because otherwise it would be in a vacuum and it would overheat, but it keeps this whole area nice and cool, 40 degrees. So I guess to finish up, we can just have a look at a couple of the overlays here. So we have oxygen. The whole base is mostly filled with oxygen, except at the very bottom, but everyone wears ammo suits everywhere anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Wiring, pretty neat and organized. I'm actually pretty happy with this. This is the main power spine, heavy watt wire going up the entire length of the map, and also up through the industrial brick over here. And then transformers and stuff everywhere. What do we got? Gases. This is plumbing, so I have a lot of cooling loops I went a little bit crazy with the liquid cooling loops over here. But this is pretty nice. Gases, oops, that's decor. Gases, also pretty minimalistic. I actually don't have that many gas pipes. It's mostly just oxygen in my main base, and then there's one hydrogen line and one natural gas line going around. And yeah, that's it. So thanks everyone for watching. If you're interested in content like this, I do stream this game. My Twitch username is the same as my YouTube username, Mr. Arbogast. So give me a follow there, or don't. I mean, I'm not your dad. But yeah, thank you for watching.